rebuild, restore. Now, of course, you can think that I am trying to do a shout-out for Habitat for Humanity and their restore projects and their buildings, but I am not, even though they do wonderful work. But what's interesting around the words renew, rebuild, restore, and then our textual name is it's time. Time is one of the ways that we orient ourselves. That we check our watches, we check our phones, we ask ourselves, what time is it? Because we're always rushing to get places, we're rushing to get things done all the time. Nothing ever stops. The email doesn't stop. There's a flow of email that just kind of just rushes over my inbox continuously. And I thank Gmail because they have unlimited storage. You can also read my email at the same time. So that's very scary. So they know all about Rich. So, and they know all about us first. And they know all about everything. But we are all in this time crunch. And when we look at the 11 o'clock news, if we're able to get the news, if we have cable, because that's a time thing too, if we're able to sit down and check the 11 o'clock news, or we look at our phones, we check the news with dread. Oh Lord, what happened in Washington this week? What happened last night? He did what? Are you for real? Iran, huh? I didn't know we were even doing anything with Iran. Now we're not okay. And what's funny is if I said, what about Iran? I bet you some of y'all are thinking, I need to check. Did he do something again? Or what's happening with this? Because we keep on getting sucked into this time thing. So I would say, in the least moment, we are living in a time where time is leading us, it's pulling us, but it's leaving us disoriented. We don't know which way is up, which way is down. What is the truth? What is real news? What is fake news? We just don't know. And when you say, yeah, I do know. No, you don't. Because if we did, we wouldn't be talking about it. So somebody believes the fake news and somebody believes the real news, and we're not going to sort that out here today. That's not the point of this. But the point is to look at the text and how it relates to our time now. Because the Hebrew people, the people of Israel, are living in a world, and they're dealing with exile. They're dealing with getting ready to go into exile, and things have just fallen apart. Things have fallen apart because nation building is hard. People building is hard. And then people usually they start working for their own interests instead of the group's interests. They start working for their own interests instead of what's best for our country or what does God ask of us. You see, they are asking the question why in a past tense sense because of the threats that they are living in that time. Because let's just keep it real. This is 3,000 years ago. We're talking Bronze Age, we're talking swords and marauders and all kinds of, unstable things. They live in an unstable world. And so, as we read these, as I read the scripture, it talks about, wine overflowing. That speaks to the real need of hunger. These persistent needs of hunger, these persistent threats of hunger, these persistent threats of war, these persistent threats to everyone's safety. Because their system broke down. It fell apart. And they're saying, well, how can we get back to get some common sense in this? How can we go a different direction than the one that we've already gone? We put our interests at heart. Maybe we got to put other people's interests at heart, and maybe we put God's interests at heart. And so when we engage the prophetic text, we are seeing the wrestle of what went wrong and how we can do it differently again. How can we do it differently? How can we turn the ship around? Can this be, instead of being the Queen Mary, instead of being the Titanic, where the ship is definitely going down, it can be maybe the Queen Mary, and it's a big ship, but it's a slow turn. But it's a turn to the left or to the right, not up or down, because down is not good. But it's pretty clear when we understand that the threats to life and death, that these threats make sense to us too now. Because the threats today have reappeared. Let's just put it like that, they have reappeared. You know, I don't think I can remember when I was in middle school or high school, in high school maybe, had the N-word said to me. This is the 90s and the 80s. This is good times. This is good times compared to now, to a certain century's political dynamics. You know, you remember the first and the other impeachment. This ain't nothing on that. So, neither here nor there. But I lived in a bubble. I lived in a bubble where things were a little bit more racially sort of kind of nice. But now everything's gone off the rails. Let's put it plain and simple. And we're dealing with the issues that people heard about and felt and were dealing with 50, 60, and 70 years ago. The threats of anti-Semitism, the threats of racism, the threats of LGBTQIA violence is real. And it's come back with a vengeance. And in the midst of this, we're checking our phones. We're checking Netflix. We're waiting on the second season of The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian is awesome. Just keeping it real. We're waiting on Black Panther 2. We're waiting on all these other things. But in the midst of this, looking forward to trying to orient ourselves through technology and entertainment, we're trying to ignore the persistent threats of today. We're ignoring the persistent threats of climate change and all these other things, and then we have our King Sunday, or King Sunday and King Monday, and we want to do days of service. And I love it, and it's good. We also have to understand that that's not what he was about. He was about actually changing this culture for the better. The service is a service in terms of an ending purpose of transformative change for this nation, not to do a do-good project. And part of the issue, I think, in the dynamic that we're having around in America, especially, because the question really is, what's wrong with us? Because let me keep it real for you for a minute. In France, people are protesting. They call them the yellow jacket people. And they're shutting down Paris all the time. The world is going crazy in Peru. Folks have been going nuts all over the world, and we're watching Netflix. We are talking about climate change, but we're really not changing how we do our climate. What we're doing with our stuff. Oh, we're going to buy some energy efficient light bulbs. Yeah, but where I'm going with this is the clean. Let me be clear with it. We want civil rights results without doing civil rights work. We want civil rights results without doing civil rights work. Now, what do you mean by that? You don't know nothing about that. You are correct. I know nothing about that. I was born in 1980. I have no clue. None. But I also have a DVD player, and I also have a VHS player, and I had to sit there and watch Eyes on the Prize. I've seen all 10 episodes of it. And I can see where the genuine is. I can recognize it's real. I know that we got some work to do. In Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait, this is a book I think this is the one that stays in my house, the one that I keep with me all the time in terms of his conversations around racial justice and where he was going at the end of his life. Because we love I Have a Dream, but we don't really get to the 1967, 1968 talking about the realities of the military-industrial complex. We're talking about the realities of social injustice, the Poor People's Campaign, and their plan to march on Washington for justice for all, for health care for all, and all those other things. In Why We Can't Wait, King says that freedom is not won by a passive acceptance of suffering. Freedom is won by a struggle against suffering. By this measure, Negroes have not paid the full price for freedom, and whites have not faced the full cost of justice. That's King, page 20. Oh, I can't wait. We have completely sanitized Dr. King. We have sanitized the civil rights movement because we don't want to recognize that a whole lot of people died. A whole lot of people lost their jobs protesting. People died protesting. A lot of students got expelled from school protesting. And I'm not talking about college students. I'm talking about the Children's March, May 3rd, 1963, in Birmingham. And that is when thousands of children are arrested, and that's when the dogs are stuck on the kids. And that's when the hoses are shut. And that's what pulls Kennedy and that administration toward actually passing those laws. Well, what are you saying? Hold up. Yeah, let's actually break this down. Yes, I am saying that that means that the SCLC, the NAACP, SNCC, and all those other organizations conspire together with parents or without parents to have children under the age of 18 leave school, then march downtown. Then they were arrested, and then guess what happened? And Big Dog got stuck on the rest of them. That's called abuse today. People lose their kids from that. But also, that's what really went down. We want to make it that, and I remember when they did the climate march out here. And we're trying to figure out, okay, this is great, yes. Oh, here come the police. Oh, well, 100% on the street. Well, yeah. No. These folks were invested so much in this movement that they're willing to risk their lives. Everything. So, but I'm not saying that, please forgive me, I'm not saying to anybody under the age of 18 that you need to go and drop out of school. No, don't do it. Go to high school, go to college, I'm not doing that. Don't get arrested. Not saying that. And I'm not saying that we have to, like you said, turn on, tune in, and drop out. But there's a real, true risk of body, of mind, of everything that they had, because their lives are on the line. God's call to renew, rebuild, and restore is a call to risk. It's a call to risk of all of the things that we have. Because God is asking us to do what is required to change this world. And that means stopping business as usual and doing whatever is necessary to stop business as usual. Because business as usual only benefits one side. And to be honest, you can't mobilize people by being, you can't, let's put it like this. If you're going to drink a beer, do you want to drink Bud Light or the real thing, the real Budweiser? And what we live in the world is, the world right now that we live in is a capitalist society where we have a choice between true evil of locking children in cages and evil light. Well, I don't know if I really want to lose the political will around getting in trouble and putting him in, impeaching him because we might not win the election next time. That's not good. That's evil light. Because the reality is that none of them are trying to actually go and stop maybe a squad, but many people are not willing to go and stop, and I'm not. I could. I have responsibilities here to go to Mexico. But that's what it takes. If we're talking about engaging in changing this environment, changing this world, we have to realize that will have to have a sacrificial property to it. And that sacrificial property is love. And that love is something that is more than just, I like you. No, that's like. Love is actually real investment in the other. real investment in the communities, real investment in who we are and why we do what we do. Real investment in the other is a whole different ballgame than just, I think you're a really great guy. And we have to figure out how to do that. And I think God has to do with it. The movement has to do with that. Dr. King has pointed the right direction. Many people point in the right direction. The question is, how do we get from one into the other? Because what God is saying is that God says that what was ruined will be restored. What was wrecked will be repaired. What was ravaged will be restored. And what was rendered dead will be revived. But we have to risk our political postures, our reputations, sometimes our jobs, sometimes our authority to actually move to a different place. King says about racism, and let's solve this problem. The prescription for the cure rests with the accurate diagnosis of the disease. But a people who began a national life inspired by a vision of a society of brotherhood can redeem itself. But redemption can only come through a humble acknowledgement of guilt and honest knowledge of self. So, this day we've been asked to renew our commitments in service to others, to our nation, and to our God. If that's your thing. Because you know something more. And that's okay. Renewing our commitment to justice means that we have to have a unified front against anti-Semitism, which is also a unified front against racism. And it's also, and let's keep it real, let's call out the devil where it is. And what it is a unified front against white supremacy and all that that means. And if you have to ask the question, that's the first step. What is this? And then let's go down the road together. To rebuild community is about that real love, that real investment in each other, in each other's lives, in each other's families, in each other's children. That's Happiness Toolbox. That is building from the ground up a whole different ballgame. And that's what we got to do. Because guess what? What we've been doing is not working. That's actually building relationships. That's living together, loving together, eating together, reading together. Don't get me started on reading books. Don't get me started. Okay? Because, yeah, let's not talk about that. Because if you're going to talk about something, you need to actually have an actual understanding of something. We have to stop this game. That is the issue of the fake news. Is that we have folks who have uninformed opinions, and those uninformed opinions are lifted above everything else that makes actual common sense. Don't talk about Du Bois' communism if you don't have an actual definition of communism, and you don't know who W.B. Du Bois is. If you're 2 out of strikes, you really are already out. And so if we're going to have conversations about important things in our community, then we actually have to be well-read and well understanding of the issues that we're actually facing. And then we have to actually commit to do the hard work beyond just talking about the issue to what am I willing to give up to make this happen. So we're about restoring bigger things than just people's self feeling good. This is about restoring humanity to God's place in the universe, where God is asking us to do things together. Restoring Du Bois' place in the virtues is about really having a conversation of one of our children, one of our ancestors who's been ignored, whose simple idea was to make this world better. Now, it doesn't matter what political philosophy it is. The point is to make the world better. It's not about removing people, make the world read a book. I'm very serious. We have to engage on a whole nother level and do the work as much as people, and this is one thing you should think, as much as people talk about war planning, we have to be in peace planning too. Okay? Because you realize there's a war college. There's West Point. where they study from the beginning to the end, Rome, all the way to the day, of everything they've done in terms of actual planning of war. We have to do peace planning in that same hard work. But it also has, and then that's where King comes in with the nonviolence, is that then you have to actually create strategies that are nonviolent, which means, but they're not, let's put it plain and simple, they're non-physical violence. Because, yes, when these children were marching down the street in the middle of Birmingham in 1963 on noonday, that is economic violence. That's what that is. They are shutting down the economy. You can't get down the street, you can't get to work. That is violence, but it's not physical violence. See, even these little things are all pieces to the puzzle. I'm making you not go, well, that's the whole point. Because restoring means actually going through and working on the stuff. You don't restore a house by just painting something over. You actually rebuilt it. Let's go have that be mad, okay? But restoring God's epic world and doing what King is asking us is about seeing a world where we all can be a part of it with our whole selves. Everything that we have, we can bring together because we've changed the way we relate. So then people are able to, you're able to see the best in each other. And you might see God in that person, or the divine being, or just even in a humanistic sense, the greatness of humanity itself. But that only begins when we start re-changing our structures. We rebuild, we renew our minds, we rebuild our souls, and then we restore this world. This is hard work. But this is the work that we can do together. And we've been on for a long time. We'll be on for a long time together, for a long time in the future. But I trust in you. And if we trust in each other, we will do something wonderful for this place. We will bring this world into a new world of shalom. Amen.
Is that not a wonderful message? It's great to have the opportunity, for those who don't know, Sloan's my husband. So it's really great not only to be able to sit in my church and not have to bring the message, but to be able to hear him preach, because that isn't something we get to do very often. So thank you, Sloan. At this time, I would invite Reverend Forte forward again for a song, My Living Is Not in Vain.
I too want to thank you for that message. It was encouraging. When I think of Dr. King, I think of all that he's done, and I can only think to myself that he must be and must have asked the question, is all of this in vain? I'm going to attempt to do this for you. Pray my strength in the Lord. If I can help somebody as I travel, Lord, then my living
Thank you, Reverend Forte. That was beautiful. I now invite Gwendolyn Van Zandt up to speak a little bit more for us about Happiness Toolbox.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very moved by Reverend Sloan's speech and Reverend Forte's song, so thank you both very much. And also Josiah and Leslie, you did an amazing job, so thank you. I'm just going to fill in some of the science behind Happiness Toolbox and who we serve and how long we've been at it, just to give you a little bit more background. Happiness Toolbox turned 10 this last summer. It started out just after Bridge got started. We had a vision of really approaching everyone in our community to bridge understanding and to support diversity leadership. So we started in the Housatonic School, and we had children in April and in the summer come and learn about their heritage, learn about their culture, and just find a place, honestly, in Southern Berkshire where they could find kids that looked like them, so they could relax and see reflections in kids that look like them and just enjoy their time. So that's how we started. And throughout the last 10 years, we've been in-school programs, out-of-school programs. We have a parent program where we teach the parents the skills that we're teaching the kids. We teach the teachers. And the skills are all about knowing who we are internally. We always get told who we are on the outside, right? We have all the labels of our race and our age and our religion. And really what we've known from positive psychology is that we all share the same character strengths inside, no matter where we come from in the world. They're called our character strengths. And so JV, who's my oldest, and I thought, let's teach that internal diversity, because it's a skill that no one can take away, right? I was always raised, no one can take away my brain, right? I can always think, I can always read, I can always learn. But positive psychology gave me this other view of all the strengths we have inside. So we talk about perseverance, we talk about hope, we talk about kindness, we talk about love. And then we relate that to our own lives and how we can use those strengths, and we relate them to people, historical figures. Stephanie, who's in the audience somewhere, where are you, Stephanie? She teaches our kids about, I think she's helping inside, about our Berkshire legends, Dr. Du Bois, Susan B. Anthony, Mum Bet. So we teach the kids that there are people that look like them, that walked the path in our community, and they don't get to learn about it in school. So what we're trying to do each step of the way is empower our children that no matter what they're facing in the school days, no matter what they're facing in family life, that they have their own internal strength and that there are people that have walked the path before them. So it looks, I would love to give you some profiles of students. We have students of families that are documented immigrants, undocumented immigrants, families of children in foster care, families that have lost a parent. We have children that live with autism and have a second language and might be living in poverty. We have children that have families that are activists and they're looking for a way to teach their kids about the troubles in the world. And so we all come together and we learn together. Our program's family style. We do break out for educational components, but most of the time we're together as a family. Last summer we were in this parish hall and we start every morning in big circles and we talk about how our day is. And like Leslie said, we choose one of those internal strengths to focus on and to build up. And it's called Happiness Toolbox because we want them to find the joy in developing themselves and in the joy in their lives and to be able to be resilient no matter what's thrown at them. Some of the kids that we pick up have been targets of direct racism. They've been called the N-word. And so in our regular bridge work during the year, we end up going into schools and supporting the schools to respond, but we always wonder about these families and these children. So we pick them up along the way. So our Bridge Happiness Toolbox, we're a family and we're a community, and all of our focus is on building up resilience, strength, and really knowing ourselves and knowing our history. I'm talking about it in this real, I'm like feeling the sermon and the song, but it really is the most joyful part of my year to see the kids and to see them grow and to see them develop. They really are leaders. You could just see Leslie and Josiah. I would have died at their ages to be told I'm going to come up and speak in front of people, and they just killed it. So we really are making our next year's leaders, and we are asking for your help because we never turn a family away. Many families can't pay or they can't pay full, and if they find us, they're in the Bridge family. So I was really blessed when Reverend Sloan and Reverend Tara offered to offer passing the plate here for our camp, because it's really what I call the heartbeat of Bridge, right? Between what these children provide and what their family provide, this is what fuels all of the work that we do in our community. So I just ask you to support it, and thank you very much.